When you're ready, how to submit. Look at the instructions of authors, as we keep saying. That's why we presented Jane, and that's why I'm looking for my pointer. And that's why we insist. But of course, at the end, when you're ready to submit, you will know which journal you're going to submit. And then they have in their website the submission instructions. There's a section of instructions for authors that's pretty extensive and explains to you everything, what to include in the submission. Look for a submission checklist. And sometimes you need to choose a specific editor for your submission. So there are journals that have different topics that talk about immunology, microbiology, epidemiology. So there are editors for each topic, and then you have to specify which editor where you send the submission, who do you should address for your submission. It's all in the journal that you chose in the instructions. So sometimes you need to create an account to submit. And so you register in the article, like this example of vaccine, the official journal, the editor-in-chief, you write to him. And then these are different: human vaccine, infectious, non-infectious, veterinary medicine, immunology. So you choose which is the topic, and then you log in and create an account. And then this is the submission list. Use their create list or create your own, but their checklist is very important. But if they don't have it, it should look like this. The following list will be useful during the final checking of the article prior to sending to the journal review. Please consult this guide for the authors for further details in any item. Ensure that the following items are present. One author that has been designated as the corresponding author. Remember, I said sometimes you do temporary work or work for a few years in an institution, and then you move on and might not be in touch with what their correspondence. Sometimes the words go away. The correspondence that will come after you submit, there's going to be a lot of emailing back and forth. So you have to have an email address, full postal address. It's not as important now as email, but somebody that's going to be attentive to replies and questions from the editor. So it had to be somebody that's active still in the field, that is responsible for the article. Sometimes it's the last author, head of the department, head of the team that's going to be, if you went on to other adventures, other places. All necessary files have been uploaded and contain keywords. See, they ask for keywords, and then you make sure you put all the important ones. All figure captions. Remember, the figures have legends and they go separate from the figure. All tables, including title, description, and footnotes, have to be complete. We talked about tables. Further considerations: manuscript has had a spell checked and a grammar checked. So they don't like misspellings or grammar that is not proper. Well, we make mistakes. We will have small errors, but try to check it by an English speaking person. I still do it. And do a spell check. Very important that you don't have this kind of mistakes. References are in correct order to the format of the journal. So the journal has a specific way that he wants to do the references, or they want to do the reference. All references mentioned in the reference list are cited in the text and vice versa. So sometimes, as I said, we're editing our work, we're rethinking certain things. We shortened the introduction and we forgot to take that reference off. Or in the discussion, we added a reference that just came out of our work that's similar to what we do, and we added. And then we forgot either to remove references that we started with in the introduction, or to add references that we added at any point. So make a check And the journal, we have a particular way in which you should number your reference. Sometimes they're alphabetically, sometimes they're in order in which they were cited in your text. Just make sure you have the order that the journal has, and that the reference included are citing in your text, and that your text is not citing reference that are not included. So you make a real check at the end on that. The less mistakes you have, the more you follow the checklist of the journal or the guidelines and the type of word they said font 12, uh, the better chance you have to submission, because you don't want to anger the gods. You want to have the editor happy and make it easy for the reviewers. So, and it also shows respect that you try your best. Um, the Sometimes, if applicable, you have a version of figures that are printed, not used now, but you have permission that has been obtained for copyright material and other sources included in the internet. So what we said, sometimes certain equipment, certain things that were included from the internet, you have to have permission that you can copy that material from other sources. Sometimes to compare your results, but not to make it your own. You have to be very clear. Um, Printed version of, I already said that. Sometimes we are not printing versions. Before, we used to mail it uh, in real paper and send it. Now it's all done online. Indicate clearly whether or not color and black and white print is required. Any further information, please visit your support center. So we talked about black and white print or color print. And as we already mentioned yesterday, the other day, you are limited when there's printed in an article in a paper journal. The color figures are more expensive. They charge you more. But since nowadays it's mainly online, there is not such a critical extra cost for presenting color pictures. But you have to find out if they accept color picture or if they only want black and white, because many journals are still printed as well as online. So the the summary of this is check the journal and follow their checklist and their requirements. Um, what to include in the submission? A cover letter must include corresponding author address, email, phone number, and fax. So again, the corresponding author is you. You wrote the article, but if you are not going to be available, you have to leave somebody that will be attentive to reply as fast as possible to this. It's critical when you're getting published. Electronic copy of the article as a PDF, and email the addresses of all the authors. So all the authors have been to be included with their addresses and email addresses, so they can contact them directly. And a cover letter. The cover letter helps clarify the importance of your work to the editor. That goes before your title and before your abstract. States your main point and why this is important. At this point, you can repeat what you have in the abstract. You can modify a few words, but it's mainly what is your main point and what was the significance on your main point. You already summarized it in the abstract, and you send something similar to the editor. Dear Dr. Smith, we think this is important. Our article that will be, what do you say, matches the interest of your journal, and we have these main findings that we think are very exciting. So you make it a little bit like, we really think you should publish our article. Look how important it is. It states the work that is novel and that's not being published everywhere. So this is just a formality. So you say this work is a new work, it's new findings that you have not published everywhere, or you're not submitting anywhere else, but you just say not published anywhere else. And says will be who will be the corresponding author, either you, the writer, or somebody else. Very important, and they will be dealing with that person. So in cover letter details, identify the journal name. You can suggest the name of possible reviewers. You can also request a specific competing scientists that you do not want to be as reviewers. So that is a sticky point. So in the cover letter, you mentioned the journal. Dear Dr. Smith, we would like to publish this article in the Journal of Infectious Diseases and the Journal of Psychology. Um, since we have these novel results that will be compatible with the topics of your journal, and we have these novel discoveries or this novel data that we think is important. Blah, blah. Sometimes they ask you to suggest names to possible reviewers. You can suggest them. I would like this to be reviewed and so on. So if it's not asking, it's usually not necessary to say it. But many times the editors, they had asked me, who do you think should be, a good candidate to review your work? So you can submit people that are your colleagues that you know, whoever you want. Sometimes they ask you. But you could request that competing scientists did not review your article. This happened when I was a graduate student. The team I was working with had a very rival team that were working in the same topic, and my advisor and this advisor didn't want they to be the reviewers of their work because it was automatic, right? You're working in bacterial resistance, and there's this other team that is actually trying to replicate their work, and they didn't want them to be reviewers because also what happened is that they see your work and they reject it. You see your name and they reject it from the start. This is just petty rivalries that are present in science as well. So you can say, please do not, I would like this person not to be included in my review. And the editors are going to review my article. So the final copy, you have the title page, which is separate from the letter. So the title page goes before the abstract. Title page includes the title and the authors, all of the authors and all of their institutions and their contact information, include the contact information of the corresponding author, the most important, and include the affiliation and addresses for each author. So each author, have you seen when you publish, have an asterisk after their name, and or it says right after what are the institutions for each author. Final copy of the figures. Each has its own separate slide or PowerPoint or a separate PJEG or TIFF file, whichever the journal will ask you how you want to present your figures and tables. So they go on separate pages in the format they want you to send them. Just label the figure. This is number 1. For example, figure 1. You have to label each figure, and the legends go separate because the figures get processed separate from the text. So each figure goes in a separate page by itself, but you have to say figure 1, figure 2. And normally figure legends are submitted separately at the end of the manuscript. Same for tables, they go on separate. Here it is, final couple of tables. Each table is its own separate page. In footnote, explain all the abbreviations. Check the size of the table and the font size. Very important. Sometimes if we have very large tables, are not going to be accepted by the journal. They're not going to fit in a page that is going to be legible. So they have a font size recommendation also for the table. So those tables that are big and very difficult to read are not going to be accepted. That's another reason why we should not have very huge tables. Try to divide your data in smaller, more easy to read and follow tables. And the table heading included above the table. So the tables go complete. Remember, they are different from the figures. The figures have figure legends in which you have a title and you explain the methodology you use, and you say which asterisk or which color signifies which case or experiment you did or result you obtained. And the tables is all in one page. The table has a title, and then it has the table with everything explained by asterisks at the footnotes. So the footnotes and the heading all are included in one page on the table. The table should stand alone. I'm just repeating myself from the other day. And so it has to have all the footnotes that explain different things. If some data were not complete, if some patients didn't show, what were the parameters used, what were the statistics used, everything. Um, Final copy of the text is use spell check again because we made modifications and figure out the total word count. There is Microsoft software has word counts. You can see if you are within the limits. Check your references again and match the list. I was telling you about the references. This is now going to go out into the world. The editor is going to choose specific editors, 2 or 3, to review your article. And they're going to be doing a reference search to get familiarized with your topic. And if they find articles that are recently published and not quoted, and they're very relevant to your what you did, very similar, that should be in your introduction, in your review, it should be present, they are going to be annoyed because you were not up to date with the reference. It takes us over 6 months or a year even to write our article. So we have to make a spell check, a reference check at the end as well. And if it's compelling to our work, we have to include that reference. You are going to be checked on that. So I'm just saying, I've said it before. I'm just reminding you. And then check the margins and spacing. It's very specific. They want all the text to be in this font, in this spacing, and this margin. Follow the rules of the journal so you don't annoy the reviewers and the editor-in-chief. So it is submitted, and the submission will be reviewed by peer reviewers, means people that are doing similar work that have usually published, and they are going to review your article, and usually in the field. They're in the field that you are. Who reviews the manuscripts? Peer reviewers are selected by the editors. Most journals send off multiple requests to find 2 reviewers. Immediately, as the head editor sees your article, when he gets to it, because some journals take 9 weeks to respond, which is very annoying. Some takes 2 weeks. It shouldn't take this long. If not, you write to them again. But then they are going to send emails to people that are in the field until they get 2 reviewers. And you as a reviewer have to respond the next day. If they ask you to review an article, please respond yes or no immediately. It's okay to say no, but don't delay the process by not responding. Theoretically, a peer reviewer is someone who is in your field, but sometimes the manuscript had 2 scientific areas. So it has psychology and it has disease. So many scientists will have a junior person to do the reviewer and edit their comments. In many cases, it means only the junior person will actually read the manuscript. It shouldn't be, but when I was a graduate student and a postdoc in Houston, I was asked by my boss, by my advisor, to review articles. It was good for me to learn how to be critical of an article. I wasn't very published at the time, but then she would review it after me. She would review my review, and it was a teaching tool that she used to with her students and postdocs so that we learn better. But it happens. The main person is really busy. It asks you to be the reviewer because your boss knows that you know what you're doing and you're immersed in this topic. And this might be the only person that does it, that reads it. We will not know who is our reviewers usually. They are anonymous. Who makes the decision to accept or reject the manuscript? The editor. So the editor-in-chief will receive the review for your manuscript to unpaid scientists in the field. So these are volunteers. We all get requests for review articles. And as I said, you have to decide and reply as soon as possible. Um, so the advantage of this is that they know science and you have not, you should have more current knowledge on the subject that you do. The disadvantage is that they are busy and they might have their own scientific bias and geographical bias. I've heard about geographical bias, people trying to publish from places that are not well known, might not be accepted. It shouldn't be. Scientific bias is somebody doesn't think your work is important or that are competing with you. So all these things we have to deal with, and we will not know who is reviewing it until we get the answer. The editor will receive the reviewers, and if they are very opposite, he will have to look for a third reviewer to see. So one reviewer rejects the paper right off because, they were not, they were biased or somehow, or didn't understand or didn't like it. And another reviewer is going to say, this is a very good article, it should be published. What does the editor do? He didn't read the articles. So he will have to find a third reviewer to see which one was right in the beginning, if it's a good article or if it's really something that should not be published. Anyway, usually the editor will know if this is worth publishing or not, but he will seek another person to review it. Okay, so what happens? These are all the possible outcomes of after submission. This is not all happening. I'm just gonna go through different scenarios that happen after you submit your article. So you submit your article, you wait from 2 to 4 weeks to hear from the editor, and then it's accepted. This is like a miracle. All the gods in the sky were with you that day. This never happens, but it happens. It happened to my advisor because she was a very good writer, very well known in the field, and it was accepted without revisions. Hallelujah. It's not going to happen to us. It's never happened to me. Um, Usually what happened it is the other scenarios. This is a very sad scenario. Rejected with no review. That means it was just wasn't a match for that journal, and it's very sad. So you will, if it's not even reviewed, you'll say, okay, fine, and then you find another journal and submit elsewhere. Okay, no discouraging. It was just not the right journal for your article. You're rejected with comments. This is more usual than be rejected with no review, and this is more advantageous to us because the comments will help you submit somewhere else. So the comments will usually reveal gaps in your article, in your data, problems with your data, um, not enough proof about what you're trying to prove. You reach too far. So you make whatever is the comments. Sometimes there are silly comments like you need a, not silly, but like your methodology is not correct. But it's person that don't understand what we did, or they say the sample size was too small, whatever. And then you then justify it, you learn, you rewrite it and submit somewhere else. And then articles, journals that accept you, um, you may resubmit if you address these comments. So if you may resubmit means that you're being accepted. They said, we will request you to make these changes if you want to be published in this journal. But that is good news. That is good news. I mean, it didn't happen like this miracle here, but there is hope, and it depends on the comments. So if the comments are too difficult to address or you don't want to, you just submit to another journal. You're not obligated to respond. But since you're there, you already got their attention and this is the journal you wanted to publish in, then it's worth to address the comments and resubmit. And it depends what the comments are. And then you resubmit and you're accepted. So this is a very positive response because they are considering to publish. It just depends how much change you want and how much willing you are to include the changes that they suggest. Um, anyway, so you read the comments, think about how to address the comments, do any experiments as soon as possible. Sometimes they ask for more experiments or more data. That's why you have to keep all your data in your lab books, on your epidemiological analysis, everything, and then submit a revised manuscript when you change, when you made the changes required. They give you a specific set of time. You have to do it in 2 weeks sometimes for them to then you resubmit it, and it's usually accepted. Um, it depends. So when you receive your reviews, you're going to be thankful to receive the comments and recognize the importance of addressing criticisms. So you have to answer the editor-in-chief and say thank you, even though we're really annoyed by all the changes they want. Thank you for reviewing my article, for your interest, and for the important criticisms. We have to be positive, and we will address them and resubmit. So you have to confirm that you will address, you have to send a letter, and that um, you will um, you will do it in the time allowed. If it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but if you need more time, you can say if you need to do more experiments, you can ask for more time. So try to think that the comments are improvements to your manuscript. Sometimes they are easy comments to address, sometimes they are more difficult. The letter from the editor will give you a 90-day period of responding to reviewers. So it's longer than I thought. So you have from a month to 3 months to respond, and sending the revised manuscript. So type of review comments, there are valid criticisms that are easy to address, and there are valid criticisms that are difficult to address. There are invalid criticisms that you can show are invalid respectfully, somebody that didn't understand what we were trying to do. And you say, well, respectfully, you have to address each comment. I disagree with you, but then you try to find evidence that supports your point, and then you resubmit it. That it depends on the editor-in-chief to accept it. On matters of opinion, they are invalid because it cannot be proven. Some review once said, I don't think this work is important at all to publish, period. And it's like, well, that's your opinion. um, so valid criticisms that are easy to address. Reviewers comment. These are actually real reviews. When discussing the prevalence of drug use, there was no mention of the prevalence of drug use in males versus females in the 18 to 22-year-old adults. I think this will be useful information. So sometimes we have deleted information because the tables were too big or we just didn't think, and this reviewer think is important, and then of course we have the information and include it. That's very easy. We have it right there. We can include it or do a quick analysis of the population we have. Valid criticisms that are difficult to address. So this is a reviewer's comment. HIV antiretroviral treatment was tested in 65 men and only 28 women with HIV and hepatitis C virus co-infection in the city. The study should have included equal numbers of men and women in different locations. Try to address this limitation. So we cannot redo the study. We had 65 men, 28 women. You say, we acknowledge this limitation. However, we believe the study population is representative of the total HIV/HCV population in California. The study was only able to be carried out in one city. So this is a nice response saying this population of 65 versus 28 is what the city represents, is what the population of the city represents. So it is valid to our knowledge because the study was only done in one city in California. So this is a good response, and it should allow you to go ahead and publish. Invalid criticisms that you can show that are invalid. For por ejemplo, I switched to Spanish. Sometimes the reviewer was obviously misunderstood as something. Maybe some of the subjects had lower amounts of HIV viral hepatitis C viral load because this subject drank less alcohol. This you don't think is related to infection with hepatitis C virus. So you thankfully answered. Alcohol consumption was monitored throughout the study. We have further clarified this statement in the methods section. So you then include that information if you have it. And if you don't have it, you respectfully say, we didn't think that was important because we studied this other thing. You have to back up your answers with data or with good arguments or references. Like this study did it without having the alcohol consumption, and your reference for the reviewer to be more informed on what this study is about. And then matters of opinion. Invalid criticism. People infected both with HIV and HCV are not an important population to study. Well, tactfully acknowledge the reviewer's opinion and put forth an alternative opinion. Make sure your answer is backed up with references if needed. That even gives more a more strong response to your the criticism of the reviewer, um, and say, see, other people have done it very similarly and it worked. Or um, that's a matter of opinion. Thank you, but it's proven to be very important, this correlation of hepatitis virus and HIV. And you cite other reference of other studies that have been done somewhere else, that they show the importance of this correlation, or you just say it is important because, and you put your own reasons. So you always have to defend yourself in a very tactful way, but firm, and show data if you have it. You don't need to do more experiments to do further analysis. It depends. If the review requests are valid, do the initial analysis as soon as possible, and then you can resubmit quickly. Sometimes they want you to do other tests to the same set of samples. But if you cannot do the experiment or analysis they request, you can try to persuade the editor that the current collection of data is sufficient. So you can try to say, one paper cannot answer every question. The next paper will address these other questions. You can say, this is an important thing. Even though our data set is small, it shows a trend. And this is the basis for us to do a bigger study in the future. Even though it's a small population, or we show the importance of this topic, and we're going to shed light into this existing problem that we answered very politely, and say we are going to do further experiments to address this important um, recommendation you made. You try to convince the editor that what you have is sufficient because it's sufficiently important and it's sufficiently big, and you cannot just redo the whole study as the reviewer asks. So you have up to 3 months to redo certain things, and you can decide what's worth it and what's not. And you decide it's not, you explain this to editor with your reasons, with your valid proof that you don't need it more. So detailed response to the reviewers. I told you this review process is long, but I mean, it happens through time for you. So you list each reviewer's comment, point out the page and section of the manuscript that is being discussed, address each point. If you made a change, show it, included the new text on your response, and if you did not make any change, say so, why not? So it's very detailed. You have the one comment that says you should include the age and gender of people in this population. You have the data, you include it. So you point out the section in which you mention this, and you have to say, we included the information requested by you on the gender and age of people of the population studied. We included in the text. We included in page 2, paragraph 3, section tal. We changed the table 1 to add this information. Um, so you exactly explain what you did in the text. You included the changes in the text, but in the letter, you have to address each comment. Sometimes there are up to 9 or 10 comments. So comment number 2, we corrected the section in the second page of the manuscript, third paragraph, this line. So the reviewer, the editor can go and say, okay, they made this change. Okay, it's here. Okay, it's fine. You address each point, um, and then you can include in the letter and in the text your changes. So if you don't want to make a change, you just kind of deal with the editor and say, uh, we don't think this is valid. We think this is enough. We consider not making any changes and see what the main editor responds. Then you resubmit after all these reviews or more experiments. Make sure you include a cover letter again, clarifying that this is a resubmission because you have to remind the editor that you already went through this process, you don't want to go again. State that the reviewers' comments are addressed one by one, detailed response to reviewers. Like for example, reviewer 1, question 1. We did this, we changed that in page style. Reviewer 2, comment 1. We didn't think those changes were needed since we already proved this in this other way. Each question of each reviewer has to be answered in a letter. Each point. Um, the new version of the manuscript is usually with track changes so that they can see the changes you made to the manuscript. So this is to facilitate the work for the main editor. They have to decide if they accept it or not. You have to convince the editor that yes, that you have enough data, this is good, this is enough. You resubmit the letter saying we answer all the points of the reviewers, and then you resubmit the new version of the manuscript with the same rules that you submitted the first time. You resubmit and wait. If it's rejected after you have addressed the reviewer's comments, don't give up. Maybe you need to do a few more experiments, maybe not, but you can try another journal and you can learn from the reviewers' comments. So this is a process we all go through. We get rejected many, many times. My first publication was rejected. I was devastated. And then it got published in another journal and it was really nice and I was very happy. But at the beginning, it's a shock. And then convince yourself that this is, you're going to learn. You're going to learn from the reviewers' comments because it was not clear. Maybe it had gaps. Um, they didn't understand your point. So you write it again, you write it better, you become better. And do not give up until you successfully publish your article. It is important to share your results with the international health community. Have patience and persevere. In science, we have to be very patient and persevere all the time. That's what takes us to a successful publication, a successful project, successful grant. We keep trying, and then we get better at it. Um, well, once it's accepted, you're gonna get your proofs. You have 2 days to reply. This is what exactly will be printed. You spelling, check the fonts, check the meaning that has not been changed. Sometimes the journals have editors and change a sentence to sound better in English or to sound more clear to them, but it's not what you were trying to say. So you have to read the whole article again, but now with fresh eyes. And you cannot change or add data at this point. This is already set in ink, right? Almost like it already has a space in the journal with this many pages. Only things that are most important, you will point out to the journal editor. If it's misspellings and there is changes of meaning that are essential, then you must point it out. You must review the proof during the limited time, usually 24 to 72 hours. Um, And that's it. And then you get published and you succeeded. How exciting.
Talk. To begin with, there's a couple of queries around the corresponding author. So Sahiti has asked, what's the actual value of the corresponding author? And if you are a corresponding author, does that mean you are solely in sort of charge of the communications with the journal after submission, or can one of your other authors also contribute to that if there's a correspondence afterwards?
No, if you are the corresponding author, you are the only one that you're going to be in touch with the editor and the journal. It will be very confusing for the editor if you have several people involved, different people for different answers. So yes, if you are the corresponding author, you are responsible for all correspondence, and you are responsible to be attentive to their notices, time limits. You're going to try to make it easier for the editor to accept your article. And it's only one corresponding author, unless for some very serious reason you have to pass it on to somebody else, then you do so. As soon as the correspondence is maintained active.
Yeah, so you could always discuss it within the issues that have come back or the queries that have come back with your authorship team, but it should be you as the corresponding author that is the one that contacts and liaises with the journal.
Good point. You discuss it with your team because it's a team effort and sometimes you don't know what to do. So our boss always go, oh my God, how do we respond to this? And everybody gets to work. And then you are the one that responds.
And also, do you think, I've never met with this before, but do you think there's a preference when it comes to the corresponding author as to whether you should give an institutional email address, or is a generic Yahoo, Gmail, whichever other server, is it all acceptable?
That's a good point. Institutional is much better. You're not just somebody out of the void presenting this article. Science is built in a team, and it is much more credible for the editor if you have an institutional email. I think so. I don't know. But if Gregorio has a different opinion, or you.
I agree. I think if you have institutional, you should go for it. But if some reason you are in between jobs and you don't have institutional anymore, then it's totally okay to go with your Gmail or another mail. Just make sure you have a professional name in your Gmail.
Yes, that you're happy is appears in print.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's true.
Excellent. So Fernanda has asked just a logistical question about the cover letter. When you're addressing the editor as part of your submission, do you just write "Dear Editor of the" and the name of the journal, or should you try to source their name, or what's the most appropriate way to address the cover letter to the journal?
Yes, if you can find the name, might be better if it's in the journal already, chief editor, or if it's in the recommendations to authors or guidelines. But it's not necessary. You can say, "Dear editor, we want to publish in your journal," and mention the journal that you're applying to, and then you go on convincing them that this is important. I wish I had some submission letter examples. I'm going to try to get. Yeah.
We could, yes, I mean, if you're happy, Marilena, and you do have some, we could always share them alongside the slides afterwards.
Okay. Yes.
Just as a template for people or an
Yes.
example.
Yes. I'm going to look for some. I think I have few, and we are going to have supplemental materials at the end.
Yes, that would be lovely.
That book from Robert Day and other articles on how to write.
Perfect.
And then
perfect. We can share that with everyone.
Great.
So Tade has asked whether the cover letter, you know, some journals, some publishers request one, others aren't so specific. So when you are submitting your manuscript, you know, is it general practice or best practice to submit a cover letter, whether they've requested it directly or not?
It is a good practice, and I cannot imagine how you would submit without a letter, a submission letter. it helps the editor, even if they do not request it. It helps the editor decide, or even go ahead and read your abstract. You just present a letter saying, we would very much like to publish in your journal. We have these novel findings that we think will be interesting to you. And here is a summary of our findings. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think sorry,
no,
can
no,
go
you
ahead.
go. No,
So,
go.
what I was trying to say is your cover letter really helps you, the editor, to be interested in your manuscript or not. You need to think about the editor is receiving many submissions and he has to go through a lot of papers, and he's not going to necessarily read them all. He has to select the ones that he's more interested in. So basically your selling point is your cover letter. That's going to trigger the interest of the editor of actually looking into your article. So in your cover letter, it's quite different from your paper, because in your cover letter, you can also be more objective to say, my study is important because of that. That's the main highlight of the field. That's the reagents we are bringing in. And then you can be very specific and very clear about what is the novelty of your work and why it's really important and why it should be reviewed and published.
Great, great. So we've got a couple of questions around actually sourcing and recommending reviewers. Bayu makes a really interesting point that obviously since the explosion and burden of COVID-19, the pandemic has created some difficulty for people who are already very overcommitted to find the time to review articles. So, I guess how to find and recommend reviewers for your manuscript, but allowing for time to do that. I guess, is there any tips or recommendations, especially within the sort of pandemic scenario that you've both come across, that is it just allow more time, or should you try to source more reviewers than you normally would?
I'm not clear of the question. If you are the chief editor, it is your responsibility to find reviewers. So that doesn't fall on you, unless
I think this is in regards to ones where you're asked to sort of request or nominate. Yeah.
Oh yes, you have to. If you're going to nominate somebody, you might ask them. You have the time. It is like an ethical obligation from the scientists, where every time that I know me or my colleagues receive an article to be reviewed, you have to think quick. And if you decline, you decline if you're really busy. Even if you want to propose somebody, you can approach them and ask. But yes, you can try to broaden the amount of reviewers you suggest, and then the editor probably is also broadening the case. I don't know. I don't know. Gregorio might have more information updated how the pandemic has affected this.
I think in general, it's not your job finding the reviews. It's basically the editor has to do it. When you submit your paper, they have to do it. So basically, I think what Marilena suggests is a really good idea of broadening your options of people. It doesn't mean then any of those people are going to be selected. At the end of the day, the reviewers are also people that you should not know who actually is reviewing your paper, because it's confidential. So it's basically the editor inviting people, and they accept, and they have to keep confidential at all times your manuscript and any of your findings. So in theory, you don't know who your reviewer is, unless for some journals I think they disclosure. I guess the life disclosure, I don't know. Maybe a few do. But during the pandemic, you just need to understand that's probably going to take longer than other times, especially if your paper is not under COVID subject, because COVID is now being quickly reviewed. But I think in other fields, you need to bear in mind that will take longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah. So this is this aspect of nominating reviewers has drawn quite a lot of interest, and there's a question here around, you know, how, when you are asked to nominate or recommend potential reviewers for your work, you know, how much does the journals actually respect that and follow up with your nominations? And in addition, if you don't actually have anyone you could potentially nominate as a reviewer, what would be the best advice in that situation?
If you don't have anybody to advise, you say so, or you can ask your colleagues, your team, who would be a good person to nominate. But if you cannot find anything after asking around, then you say, I do not propose any reviewer. It makes the editor's job harder. If you don't have anybody to propose, then they have to go, oh my God, okay, they scratch their heads. What am I going to do here? So yeah, if you can find anybody, that's fine. What was the other part of the question?
So just if, yes, are the journals obliged to sort of respect your nominations and actually follow up with the people you nominate?
They are, but like Gregorio said, this is anonymous, confidential. So the editor can ask the person that you recommended or persons, and they could decline.
Yes.
They could be really busy, or they don't want to do it, or whatever reason. You'll never know. So they will try to respect. I had a case in which I was publishing an article, and they and I suggested my previous boss, and she couldn't do it. So she actually contacted me later and said, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it, which is not ethical, but anyway, that happens.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's also very important to, when nominating people, of course, sometimes you want people who understand your work better, so that's why you're nominating them, as opposed to simply choosing big names of big scientists, because these people could be very busy and they may not be likely to accept to review more papers they are already doing it.
Yeah.
So if you were selecting really big names, that might delay your process too. I think the best is like nominating someone that you think that can give you valuable feedbacks, because he knows your work. And at the same time, listing people that you don't want to review your paper is equally important, because you don't want an extra barrier, or you think there might be conflict of interest. You went through a conference and then you discover that someone that you don't know is also working a similar topic, and then maybe you don't want those people as well to review your paper. It may not be a good idea.
Yes, yes. Okay, so we've got some questions just around response times from the journal. So people just querying Sumoni and Shaytu, just querying whether, you know, how long should you wait for a response from the journal? I'm guessing they give you an indication of a window of time, but is it okay to nudge or remind after a long wait?
Yes, especially when you try to publish in journals that have a lot of submissions that are more famous or preferred. You can wait 6 months, 8 months. It's very frustrating. Oh my God. So you try to remind the editor. Yes, I would say after 3 months, you have 6 months. It's a bit long. You try to remind the editor, send a nice letter. But yes, the more higher tier journals you want to publish, the more wait time, and sometimes they don't reply to you. If you ask the editor and it doesn't reply, I might as well send it somewhere else. Then you send a letter saying, I'm gonna withdraw my application for publishing your journal. I haven't heard from you in 6-9 months, imagine. And please consider my withdrawal and publish somewhere else.
Okay, lovely. So we've got lots of questions coming in. This has really driven up the interest, I think, as we've been discussing this. And we've actually got a couple of hands. Oh no, hands have gone down. Okay, no, I was going to unmute someone,
the other questions are answered.
Lowered their hand. It could have been answered. So just a little bit of clarification again on the corresponding author here. Michael and Sahiti are both asking around, should the last author on the paper always be the corresponding author? And also, you know, is the correspond, if it's not always the last author or the senior author, obviously the first author value is actually higher than the corresponding author value in terms of position?
Value, I don't know. The corresponding author is usually the person that wrote the article, the first author. Even if you have a senior, you know, person in the group, or sometimes the senior, the principal investigator in a team wants to be the corresponding author. I don't think it adds to diminish importance to if you are the corresponding author or not. It's nice to have control on what you wrote and being able to answer, but you have to run the reviewers' suggestions by your team and your principal investigator. You always need advice, and you always should work on a team. Either first author or corresponding author are both valid and should just be available to answer the questions. As you saw, it could be back and forth from the editor, letters, reviewers, many instances. And if the person is too busy, the PI is too busy, it's better to be you. Gregorio, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually see a lot of cases in which the corresponding author is also is usually a supervisor, not necessarily you. It's more because sometimes you are transitioning in a lab for a few years or so, and it's better if you have a corresponding author that can actually really assess and respond to the questions in a longer term, because sometimes things change as well, and sometimes the supervisor wants to know exactly what is being asked. So they will put their names in because they help to write the paper, they know the story, and they know how the story is changing after publication, right? With new evidence, things can change too. So the corresponding author should be also someone that can not only explain the paper, defend the paper for much longer. So sometimes what you do is either your supervisor or both of you, the first author and the supervisor who helped to write the paper and conduct the experiments. Because if people get questions about methodology, how things were done, then your supervisor won't know that much as you, because you were the person who did it. So those questions will be appropriate for you to answer. But other questions that come with more concepts and things that are changing, then your supervisor is the best person to answer, because after you left the lab, maybe you don't know anymore what's going on in the field or in a specific lab. There are new data that was generated by someone else that's either supporting your publication or not. So maybe the correspondent best to answer your supervisor.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think to clarify for everyone, then it's not the corresponding author is someone that can be nominated within the team of authors. You decide who should be the corresponding author to liaise with the journal, but that doesn't necessarily mean the team won't come together to address the queries or the responses. Exactly. And it doesn't necessarily mean the corresponding author has to be the first or the last or allocated to any particular position in the lineup.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also the corresponding author could be the person who will be receiving requests to send reagents. So sometimes the supervisor wants to have control where the reagents are going. So that's why sometimes they also put their names on. So they have better control of the materials that have been produced by your publication.
Great. Just to quickly revisit the query around delays, Naneka is asking if, you know, if it's taking a really long time for a journal to give you feedback, is it actually possible to request that the review is suspended or that you retract it so that you can submit it somewhere else?
Yes, absolutely. But you have to let them know. I haven't heard from you in a long time. Please consider my, what is the word? So withdrawal from your, we do no longer wish to publish in your journal, and we're going to submit somewhere else. And then they're obliged to know. And then you might be better off publishing in another journal that is less busy and less famous.